The church held 200 souls, but on the day we buried Thomas, only 17 showed up. Not one of them shared my blood. I sat in the front pew, my arthritis-worn hands clutching a handkerchief I hadn't yet needed. At 73, I'd cried myself dry over the past week. Now I was just hollow, a gutted house waiting for the wreckers. Behind me I heard the whispers, Thomas's colleagues from the hardware store, our neighbor Mrs. Chen, a few folks from his Thursday night poker game. Good people, kind people. Strangers, really, when it came down to it. The organ music swelled, and I stared at the mahogany casket holding the man I'd loved for 51 years. Thomas deserved better than this. He deserved his brother Robert standing vigil. He deserved our son Michael in the pew beside me. He deserved the grandchildren he'd taught to fish and build birdhouses. Instead, he got me, just me. Grandpa would have wanted us to celebrate his life, the young pastor said, and I almost laughed. This boy had met Thomas exactly once, 3 days ago, to plan this funeral. He didn't know Thomas at all. Didn't know how Thomas sang off-key to Patsy Cline while doing dishes, or how he'd saved pennies in a jar for 30 years just to take me to Paris for our 50th anniversary. If they wanted to know Thomas, they should have asked Grandpa. Grandpa, my father, Samuel Morrison, had died when I was 16, but his presence felt stronger in that empty church than any of my living family. He'd been a man of few words, but enormous wisdom, the kind who could read a situation like others read newspapers. Margaret, he'd told me once, after a particularly brutal fight with my mother, people show you who they are. Your job isn't to make excuses for them, it's to believe them. I'd spent 50 years not believing what my family showed me, making excuses, building bridges they kept burning. The trouble started, I suppose, when I married Thomas. My mother never forgave me for choosing a hardware man over the banker she'd picked out. "You're throwing your life away on someone beneath you," she'd hissed at our wedding reception, loud enough for Thomas to hear. He'd squeezed my hand and smiled, but I saw the hurt in his eyes. My brother Robert, younger by 3 years and favored by mother until the day she died, had been Thomas's best friend first. That was how we'd met, actually. Robert brought Thomas home from the Navy, and I answered the door in my yellow sundress. Thomas said later that he knew right then. Took him 6 months to work up the courage to ask Robert's permission to court me. Robert had given it, then spent the next 5 decades resenting it. "You changed when you married him," Robert told me once, years into our marriage. "You used to be fun, spontaneous, now you're just domestic." What he meant was, you used to worship me, you used to make me the center of your universe. But I'd found a better universe in Thomas, and Robert never forgave either of us. When Michael was born, I thought things might change. I imagined Sunday dinners with Robert and his wife Linda, cousins growing up together. Instead, Robert moved to California for a business opportunity and visited maybe twice a year, always with criticism wrapped in concern. "The boy needs more discipline, Margaret. You're spoiling him, Margaret. Thomas is too soft, Margaret." Thomas was perfect, patient where I was anxious, steady where I wavered. He taught Michael to tie his shoes using a story about 2 bunny ears. He sat through every school play, every baseball game, every science fair. He was there. More than I could say for myself, sometimes. I was so busy trying to be the daughter my mother wanted, the sister Robert expected, that I sometimes forgot to just be Michael's mother. Grandpa would have shaken his head at that. "You can't fill a cup that's got a hole in it, Meggie," he used to say. "Some people will take and take until you're empty, then blame you for having nothing left to give." Michael, my beautiful, bright, angry son. I watched him drift away in increments so small I didn't notice until the distance was vast. First college, which was natural. Then a job in New York, also natural. Then a girlfriend we met twice, a wedding we attended but didn't help plan, grandchildren we saw in photographs but rarely in person. "He's busy building his life," Thomas would say, always defending, always hopping. "He's punishing us for something," I'd reply, "but for what? For loving him, for doing our best." The real break came 3 years ago at Thanksgiving. We'd driven 8 hours to Michael's house in Connecticut, a gleaming modern thing, all glass and steel, so unlike the cozy Cape Cod where we'd raised him. His wife Jennifer was pleasant but distant. The grandchildren, Emma and Jack, barely knew us. At dinner, Michael drank too much wine and finally said what he'd apparently been thinking for years. "You know what my therapist says?" He'd laughed bitterly. "She says I was raised by emotionally unavailable parents who prioritized their marriage over their child." Thomas had gone pale. I'd felt something crack inside my chest. "That's not fair," I'd whispered. "Isn't it? You two were so wrapped up in each other, there was never room for anyone else. Every decision was about what you wanted, your perfect little life. I was just there." Jennifer had tried to shush him, but he was on a roll. "And the worst part, you don't even see it. You think you were great parents because you showed up to games and remembered birthdays, but you never actually saw me." We'd left the next morning. Thomas cried on the drive home, the only time I'd seen him cry in 50 years. Did I fail him that badly, Maggie? Were we really that selfish? "No," I'd said fiercely. "We loved him with everything we had." But doubt had planted its seeds. When Thomas's doctor said stage 4 and 6 months maybe, my first call was to Michael. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail trying to keep my voice steady. "Your father is very sick. Please call me." He texted 3 days later, "Sorry to hear that. Keep me posted." Keep me posted, like I was updating him on weather conditions. I called Robert. He picked up on the first ring, and for a moment I felt hopeful. "Margaret," I heard, "I'm sorry." "When can you come? Thomas asks about you every day." A long pause. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Robert, he's your brother. By marriage, Margaret, not by blood. And honestly, after everything that happened with the inheritance. That was Mother's decision, not ours. When Mother died 15 years ago, she'd left everything to Robert. Thomas and I had never cared about the money, but Robert had convinced himself we'd manipulated her somehow, tried to cut him out. The fact that the opposite was true didn't seem to matter. "I've made peace with my choices," Robert said. "I suggest you do the same with yours." He hung up. Thomas died on a Tuesday. Just before dawn, I was holding his hand. His last words were, "Tell Michael I'm proud of him, tell him I'm sorry." Sorry for what? For loving me, for being human, for not being whatever impossible thing Michael needed him to be. I called Michael from the hospital. This time, he answered. "Dad's gone," I said. Silence. Then, "When's the funeral?" "Saturday, will you come?" Another pause, so long I thought the call had dropped. "I'll have to check with Jennifer. The kids have activities." "Michael, it's your father's funeral." "I know what it is, Mom. I'll let you know." He never did let me know. He just never showed up. Neither did Robert. Neither did Michael's family. Neither did any of the cousins, the nieces, the nephews, all the branches of the family tree I'd watered for decades with cards and calls and gifts and concern. The tree, it turned out, had no roots, or maybe I'd been cultivating plastic flowers all along. At the reception after the funeral, held in the church basement with cookies Mrs. Chen had baked and coffee the pastor made, a man approached me. Tall, silver-haired, maybe 60, he had kind eyes. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm David Chen, Lucy's son. I wanted to tell you what your husband did for my family." I blinked at him, confused. 20 years ago, my father died suddenly. We had no insurance, no savings. Thomas, I called him Mr. Morrison then, he came to our house with groceries every week for 6 months. He paid our rent twice when we couldn't. When I said we'd pay him back, he said, "Just help someone else someday." He saved us. I stared at this stranger, this man whose story I'd never heard. Last year, when my mom needed surgery, Thomas organized a fundraiser at the hardware store. Didn't tell her, he knew she was too proud, just handed her an envelope with enough to cover everything. David's eyes were wet. He was the best man I knew. "I'm sorry your family couldn't see that." After he left, others came with their stories. the poker buddies Thomas had loaned money to, always interest-free, never asking when it would be repaid, the young couple he'd helped build a porch, the teenager he'd mentored, who was now an engineer, the woman whose car he'd fixed in a snowstorm, refusing payment. A whole congregation of people Thomas had touched, had helped, had loved. None of them related by blood, all of them family in every way that mattered. I returned to our empty house, the Cape Cod with the blue shutters Thomas had painted every 5 years, the garden he'd tended, the porch swing where we'd watched sunsets for 5 decades. I sat in his recliner, surrounded by silence. On the side table, I found an envelope with my name in Thomas's shaky handwriting. Inside, a letter dated 2 weeks before he died. My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I suspect you're alone. I'm sorry for that. I know you're blaming yourself, wondering what you did wrong, how you failed our son or my brother. You didn't fail. We built a good life, you and I, we loved each other, and we loved Michael the best we knew how. That we weren't perfect doesn't make it less true. Your grandpa Samuel told me something once, before we married. He said, Thomas, my daughter has a heart big enough to hold the whole world. Your job is to make sure the whole world doesn't bleed her dry. I tried, Maggie. I hope I succeeded even a little. The people who matter will show up, and the people who show up are the ones who matter. Look around at my funeral. I'm betting it's small. I'm betting our family isn't there. I'm also betting you're surrounded by good people who understood what we built together. That's enough. We're enough. We always were. All my love. Thomas. P.S. Remember what your grandpa said. People show you who they are. Believe them. I folded the letter and looked around the empty house. Tomorrow, I would call the lawyer about the will. Next week, I would start sorting through 51 years of shared life. Eventually, I would figure out how to exist in a world without Thomas. But tonight, I just sat in his chair and thought about Grandpa's wisdom, Thomas's love, and the difference between the family you're born with and the family you choose. The church had been small, the pews mostly empty. But the love had been real, and in the end, that was the only thing that mattered.